Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Give Yourself Goosebumps book review. This comes from the special edition lineup within the series. It's book number 5, The Curse of the Cave Creatures. Now, this was a first time read for me, in case you all were wondering out there. I've never read this book up until I read it for the first time and then immediately reviewed it. So I had no expectations going into this. I looked at the cover a while ago, in passing when I was organizing my bookshelf and reminded myself that this book existed. And I wanted to check it out sooner than later. And I don't know what prompted me to want to get into this one. I guess I was talking on Discord with a few people. And I remembered how much I liked this one Give Yourself Goosebumps book called Alone in Snakebite Canyon. And this one seemed to be kind of similar to that. So I wanted to see if I liked this one as much as I did that one. And I was kind of shocked by how much I disliked this book. Off the bat, this is definitely one of the more rarer Goosebumps books. A lot of you that clicked on this video are probably here to hear my thoughts about this rare book. And sometimes it sucks to do this, but I have to say, if you see this book for an exorbitant price on the internet, it's not worth the money to buy it and read it. It really isn't. It's more of a collector's item. A lot of these rarer Goosebumps books inherently have this mysticism because of the price, and most often than not, they don't live up to the price hype. This is no exception. And I have a lot to unpack with this book, and I really want to lay into it a bit. But here's the thing. Taste is subjective. There might be something in here for everyone. To me, this doesn't really do much for me. It doesn't really feel all that goosebumpsy. Honestly, I'll probably forget a lot about this until I look at the cover again, or if I ever finish Give Yourself Goosebumps and do a ranking, I'll look back on this book and be like, yeah, didn't like that one. So take that for what you will, but because it's so rare and because it's kind of undercovered, I should say, on the internet, go check this out if you're able to get a copy for your collection or find it out in the wild to read it. Maybe you might like it more than I did. Okay? So with that out the way, let's get into the plot overview of The Curse of the Cave Creatures without giving too much away. So, the story starts off like every Give Yourself Goosebumps book, where you are the main character, essentially. You are basically deciding the trajectory of the book, and because Give Yourself Goosebumps is essentially a game book series, you are kind of playing along. I wouldn't say role playing, but you're kind of playing into the story and making decisions that impact future events, right? Now, this special edition is a power play. So, in these power play special edition Give Yourself Goosebumps books, you are actually tasked with more gameplay function or sometimes a whole different setup than Give Yourself Goosebumps normally is in the normal books, or there's some added level of difficulty that is inherently there. Whether this book actually executes difficulty, we'll save that for the review portion. But anyway, you are out in Arizona and you are visiting your cousin Dennis's house, and he has invited you up to this cave in the nearby mountains, I guess nearby his neighborhood. The story starts you off pretty much in the thick of it. You're already in the cave or pretty much approaching it. And you wander into the cave, right? And you and Dennis are mesmerized by these cave paintings that are said to be very ancient and old and goes back to the original people that inhabited the land many, eons ago. So this, of course, perplexes you. But as you're looking around the cave with Dennis, you notice a bear skull. And you disturb the bear skull, which, of course, unleashes this potential curse hiding within it, called the cave spirit. And once you do this, a shaman appears and tells you that what you have done has basically cursed you, and the cave spirit is going to turn you into essentially a cave painting to hang out with the rest of these poor souls that have been collected over millennia and eons from this cave spirit of sorts. So the shaman, after dropping that bombshell on you, does tell you that you do have one option to get out of it, and that is you're going to have to face the cave spirit head to head, either as a hunter or as a spellcaster. Now, I should put this out there. I usually try to play at least both diverging arcs at least once honestly all the way through before I do what is called the bookmark technique, which means that after I'm done trying to play through organically, I'll go back to the start and I'll start doing color-coded bookmarks, and I'll start marking every time a page has a diverging point. And then once I get to an ending, I work my way backwards in the order that I put them in, so I can at least experience the whole book, right? So I decided to go the spellcaster arc first. And this arc sucked. This arc sucks so bad. But essentially, within both arcs, you're given one item off the bat. So, for example, in the spellcaster arc, you're given a wand. And this wand may or may not have these abilities, and there's a whole list of rules that the shaman or whatever explains to you when you pick your arc on either side, how many uses you're allowed of it, and pretty much after a certain point, if the page tells you to mark it off on said page on this list that you're technically supposed to write on, but I don't do that because I don't want to damage my books. You're supposed to write that the item has been used up, right? And you get one off the bat. I think in the spellcaster you get the wand, and you get 4 other items, which are basically what is called talismans. There's a sponge that can generate rain and storms. There's a mini skull that can shrink beings and stuff like that. And I think there's a few other ones. But essentially, you have to pick the right items, right? If you're playing this honestly, because you have to leave out one. And if you leave out the one item that leads you to the true ending, you've done screwed up, and you're going to have to play the whole book again. But we'll get into the difficulty in just a second here. But essentially, you pick 3 items on top of the one that you're given, and then you start the story off. Well, almost immediately, if you're in the spellcaster arc, Dennis and you, after you get your talismans, go back to Dennis's house. And Dennis, of course, wants you to play with him, is being a jerk to you about it. And you're like, okay, we just get back home. I need some personal space. But the moment you get home and you go into Dennis's room, I guess, you notice that there's a skeleton in Dennis's closet as he leaves. And the skeleton's essentially coming after you. And you have to use one of the items that you're given to put a stop to the skeleton. And if you choose the right one, which I think may or may not be the shrinking one or another one, I don't want to give too much away on which ones to pick or anything. But the skeleton essentially gets taken care of. And once that happens, you're basically chased out of your house to hide from Dennis, because Dennis wants to pester you and get under your skin. So it comes down to another diverging point where I think you can hide out in the park or just go straight into the desert. And if you go the park route, this is where you see this traveling ice cream sorceress woman who traps you within her ice cream truck thing. Yeah, that was very weird. But of course, you have these magic talismans that can get you out of the situation and get rid of her. And if you manage to evade her, I think there is a fire demon that you counteract, and you have to put a stop to them. And then once you put a stop to them, then you're able to venture off into this ghost town with this ghost sheriff that is able to arrest you, and you have to find a way to get out of being arrested. And if you pick the right path and you do what you need to do, I think there's like a magic key or something. I'm remembering another item now that can unlock anything. Eventually, once you escape the ghost town, you come across the cave spirit. And let me tell you, this isn't even a spoiler, because the moment you meet the cave spirit, you're going to see this. The cave spirit is literally a magician wearing a black cape, a black top hat, and a black trench coat. And this is supposed to be a book about cave creatures that go back to like Stone Ages. I don't have much else to say. But anyways, as you'll see in this arc and in the other arc, the objective now, once you come across the cave spirit, who is the magician in this one, is that he wants to kind of test you. He wants to see if you're willing to put up a fight and kind of see through his ruses. And he gives you 2 tests. And if you're able to put a stop to the 2 tests, he may or may not leave you alone, or you may just defeat him in his own folly. And if you go one route, of course, it probably leads you to a bad ending. But if you pick the right one, I don't want to spoil which one it is. There's a whole thing about these talismans and how you use it against them. And there's a whole thing about the talismans I haven't really touched on. But if you use them in the wrong context, in the wrong vein, you essentially get it backfired on you. And it may or may not succeed in the right way, and you get the true ending of the arc, which basically involves putting a stop to it all, and you get to go back to your cousin's house, and everything seems normal, but you're given like a magic kit, stuff like that. I didn't even go down the secondary side arcs, which are basically filler, but it's probably the best stuff going on in this arc, about this one scientist guy doing research, and he puts you in a pit and fills it with spiders and scorpions. And there's this whole thing where you have to use the weapons to kind of stop the spiders and scorpions. And that part of the arc does help you get to where you need to go for the true ending as well. But I don't want to spoil that because that's probably the best part of the arc there. But that's basically all you're getting out of the arc here. I didn't go over most of the endings because most of the endings, quite frankly, are kind of corny and cheesy, stock stuff going on. There's nothing really out there and graphic like other Give Yourself Goosebumps books. And like I said, I don't want to go into too much spoilers there because, if you're playing this game book honestly all the way through, I don't want to give away every ending, but there is one ending in here as I'll get into the review portion. Or I should say a reveal / ending that made me absolutely cringe. So that's the Spellcaster arc in a nutshell. Now, if you go the Hunter arc route, this is essentially the same build, except this time you're given weapons up front that you're going to need to use to fight these creatures that essentially come to life from inanimate objects such as stuffed toys or just figures laying around or even animal cookies that the cave spirit has possessed and has turned into creatures. Now, this was definitely my more preferred arc in this book, I would say. And you're given off the bat this sword, I think, and over time in this arc, Dennis, your dingbat cousin, tries to steal it from you. and through the trials and tribulations as you're first fighting some creatures and get lost in the shuffle, I should say. But you're given something like that, and then you're given some other items like an ice rifle with ice bullets that you only have 5 rounds for, and if you use all 5, the book tells you that you need to mark it down. So that's one of them. Another one is a flaming arrow. There's a few others, but this is the kind of stuff you expect. So one of the first things that you interact with once you start the Hunter arc is it pretty much shoots you into this snake toy in a bathtub coming to life, which scares you, and you ultimately put a stop to it because you realize that, hey, something's supernatural might be going on with this. And after you defeat the snake, the cave spirit that I guess possessed the snake moves into this stuffed lion and becomes a mountain lion. And it depends on what weapons you use, but I think the right one to pick in this one, because it's early on, it's not quite a spoiler, I think it's the ice rifle, which causes you to freeze the room, and then you have to melt it, which of course causes a huge flood of water to break out of the house, and it sends you outside for the remainder of the story. So once you do that, you're given like an option to like rescue the mountain lion or whatever, and you can choose to do so or leave them behind. But in doing so, you kind of end up in one mini tangent arc. You end up in this like parallel dimension where time stands still, and people and creatures who have wandered in there over the years are pretty much stuck there for eternity. And this one guy is trying to get you to help him use these weapons left over from a former hunter who was killed to maybe use them against this mastodon beast that is hiding one of the exits, and you find out what happens there with all of that, because you have lost your own weapons and you have to use somebody else's and stuff like that. So that was probably one of the coolest part of the arcs. But if you decide to keep the mountain line, it sends you down a really cheesy and corny plot line where the line tries to take you and possibly turn you into either food or a family member. Yeah. But I think the real arc that you want to go down is once you get these weapons, I should have said this beforehand, you're pretty much left to go explore through the countryside or head down the specific area that you're familiar with. And one faction will take you a route where you essentially, how do I say this without really spoiling this arc? Because this arc is very short. You have to essentially navigate a few hurdles here with a few animals. Like I said, there's a thing with Dennis's younger sister about a pterodactyl or a pterosaur that comes to life from a cookie. And the pterosaur may or may not take you and make you fly around this desert landscape and drops you off in certain areas, one of which might be the right area. And in doing so, you start to realize, should I run? Should I use these weapons? Which leads you to a page where you can decipher a clue. And if you can decipher the clue, you get to meet the cave spirit in this arc, who is pretty much the cover here. He is a spirit bear. And the spirit bear now has tasks for you as well, similar to the other cave spirit creature from the Spellcaster arc. But here, it essentially wants you to use the right weapons and, kind of outsmart them. And it's very easy to defeat the bear if you have common sense. And once you defeat the bear and everything seems normal, the shaman kind of congratulates you, and you get to find out what you get to do with all this cool hunting stuff that you've acquired and stuff like that. That's really the true ending there. And that's basically all you need to know about both arcs in a nutshell. And that's essentially what you're going to expect out of the Curse of the Cave Creatures. So, yeah, let's get into some positives, because I do have some minute ones here before I lay into it. One thing I think this book does really cool is introducing the concept. I like how the book introduces you right in the thick of it with Dennis. While Dennis can be annoying, and rightfully so, I will mention him in the negatives, I do think the setup to this book is kind of cool, with the whole idea of cave creatures coming to life, possibly from these cave drawings. I thought that would have been a cool angle for a Give Yourself Goosebumps book, while it pretty much never even explored that concept. And the book, pretty much for the majority of it, because most of it's a Spellcaster arc, didn't even feel like a cave creatures book. It had a fun setup to it. There were some cool moments to the book, I will say. It's not all terrible, as I'm going to probably make it out to be when I get to the negatives. There were some fun moments. I think, honestly, my favorite moment of this whole book was the pit with the scorpions and the spiders, I think, in the Spellcaster arc. That was probably one of the more exhilarating parts of the entire story, even though I think the Spellcaster arc as a whole was weaker than the Hunter arc. I did enjoy that. And I did enjoy the creativity in the Hunter arc with having animals come to life from inanimate objects. There was some cool things to be had there. Not quite good imagery or good writing or anything, but the concept was cooler in that arc, and I really enjoyed it for that. So yeah, I have some positives with it, but not much. I have a lot of negatives to unpack with this, so sit tight. But the first main negative I have with this book is that you have this book called The Curse of the Cave Creatures. You have this cover of a bear coming out of cave paintings within a cave. You would think that, of course, this book is going to touch on that. The only time you see these cave paintings get brought up is like in the first 4 or 5 pages, and in pretty much, I would say, a good amount of the endings, which honestly ties into another negative. It's the same ending in both arcs, where if you get captured or you get easily defeated by the bear creature or the magician, you are turned into part of the collection on the wall. And there is pretty much, in one arc, I would say the spellcaster arc, there's, I think, at 3 times you get that ending, and it's the same page redirect. And the same thing applies for the cave creature, not the cave creature, but the cave bear one in the hunter arc, albeit a different page and a different way of saying that you ended up as a cave painting, but it is still the same redirect stuff going on there. That's the only time you see this stuff, and I just feel like this book is a huge clickbait thing. It is not what it's advertised to be, and that plays into, how this book reads. There are so many pages in this book of just, you get dense, I'm talking dense, 5 options, and all you have to do, if you were using the bookmark method, is just to peek a page further on each of them, and you can easily see the laziness going on here with this game mechanic, because this is a power play book and it's trying to insinuate that there's some challenge to it. No, if you go to those 5 option pages and just peek a page further on each of the options, they're almost always are going to redirect you to an ending, which is probably being turned into a cave painting. It is so boring. It is so dull. And, I don't mean to knock these special edition gameplays, because I know that this probably can be considered more challenging than your average just basic 2-arc, give yourself goosebumps book. I can commend it for that. But this book, you have to choose items. You have to choose them. And the book goes out of its way to say, if you use them a certain amount of times, it's going to force you to write down that you can't use it anymore. The only time that rule was enforced was, I think, on literally 2, maybe 3 pages tops for specific items. And even if you decided to abide by the rule or didn't, it doesn't really matter, because after a certain point, I started to notice you can spam the ice rifle essentially in the hunter arc, even though the book tells you to put it away. And if you continuously spam it, you still get to the same redirect that takes you to the correct path to the spirit bear. So what's the point? What's the point? You can just continuously spam it and ignore the rules and get to the true ending. There's no challenge in that. There is absolutely no challenge in that. And on the spellcaster arc alone, I think I saw it one time, and I literally, just for giggles, I went through the spellcaster arc and I used the wand, or I think it was the shrinking skull. And anytime I saw those as options, if one wasn't available but the other one was, I'm like, okay, I'm picking that one. And sure enough, it took me in the right direction I needed to go every time. It's just super easy to navigate this. And if you needed to know the wrong options, all you have to do is just kind of peek ahead and notice that it's sending you to that bad redirect. It's just a bad laid out gameplay function. I don't know if they thought this one out through or not, but holy crap. Did they actually play test these books back then? Like, I'm being serious. I'm not trying to be like mean about it. But it just feels like they needed to test this one out, at least in terms of the gameplay. When it comes to how this book reads and how enthralling it is, the gameplay probably could have helped it. But the whole thing about this book is that if it just feels like how most, if not, a decent amount of these Give Yourself Goosebumps feel. They can feel a bit random, but most of the time the randomness is centered around a generalized idea, right? If you have a book about an evil professor, right, and you go into his laboratory, if it sends you off two divergent paths where you get to go into a mirror world, for example, the mirror world arc is going to be all themed around mirror world creatures and mirror world happenings, right? And the other arc, if it sends you on this crazy mayhem fight through the city, it's going to take you there. This book doesn't take you to a specific place in the arcs. They just give you two characters to play. Now, you might think that, hey, that's kind of cool, which it should be, but the story, because there's no clear direction where they're trying to guide you, you just end up feeling like you're just jumping from this point to this point, this. It's just scatterbrained. It's random. It starts to kind of lose the focus of what it is, especially in the Spellcaster arc, where you end up in like a ghost town trapped in a prison cell. Why are we trapped in a prison cell in a ghost town with a sheriff when the purpose of the book is to interact with cave creatures? Why are we fighting fire emblem demons? Why are we interacting with people stuck in a time void? Like, it just makes no sense. Some of this stuff just feels so out there. The endings, there's no real standout ending to this book, because often than not, even the bad endings in some of the greater Give Yourself Goosebumps books are most of the time dark, and they're written so grisly and terrifying that it's cool to hit them. These endings all pretty much were bland or just flat out sucked. They weren't good, especially the Mountain Lion ending. That was the cheesiest thing in this whole book. There's some really corny moments. There's a whole thing about the sorceress ice cream lady wanting to turn you into a frog. And there's an ending involving that is absolute cringe. I even mentioned the dumbness of specifically in the Spellcaster arc, where you are told that this cave spirit, which is implied to be, ancient inhabitant people, possibly haunting this cave. This collector is collecting cave paintings. Obviously, you think he's some prehistoric person. The identity of the cave spirit in the Spellcaster arc is a magician wearing a top hat, a black trench coat, and a black cloak. It's just, why? Why? Just stupid. It's just stupid stuff. And yeah, this book to me, I would say the Spellcaster arc was a flat F, and maybe the Hunter arc was like a D. And that's usually how I try to gauge how I grade these, is I compare both arcs and I go from there. So you might know where I'm going with this. So from a 0 to 5 star basis, I feel like I've ranted long enough about this book. I decided, because I wasn't impressed with either, I thought one was terrible and one was just mediocre, I gave this book a bad, which was less than a 3 out of 5 stars. So I deducted 2 points off the top for a lot of those issues off the bat. And I decided to be a little more harsher on it and deduct 0.2 further for just being so vapid and being a really sad letdown of this being a special edition power play book. You would think that this would be fun to play. It just wasn't. It didn't even feel like a Goosebumps book. There's no Hallmark Goosebumps moment here. There's not even that many Hallmark Give Yourself Goosebumps moments, even though it just feels like a Give Yourself Goosebumps book, and it kind of reads like it because they stylized the writing to it. But yeah, it just feels soulless. So I wanted to go a little harsher on it. And I gave this book about a 2.8 out of 5 stars. It's a D-. It's a bad Goosebumps book, in my opinion. It might not be that low for everyone, but that's just how I feel about this. Not a fan. Wouldn't recommend it, but like I said earlier, you can try it if you want to try it. You might like it more than I did, but to each their own. So yeah, that's my thoughts on The Curse of the Cave Creatures. Let me know down in the comment section if you've read this book before. Do you love this? Do you hate this? I'm dying to know. and I'll see you next time.